story or account that's been given here. And what I wanted to focus on is he was given instructions from the Lord, very specific instructions. And then he takes those instructions and modifies them. And he justifies that modification. And he tries to make it sound like it's just as good. And what's the problem? That type of thing. So I want you to keep that context as we read through this story, starting in verse 1 of chapter 15, okay? So we're going to read through it here real quick. And, of course, try to figure out where I'm going to put aviation into this study, because that is the mystery. Where is this going to fit? It's going to fit somewhere, believe me. All right, verse 1. Samuel also said to Saul, "The Lord sent me to anoint you king over his people, over Israel. Now, therefore, heed the voice of the words of the Lord." So, first thing, heed the voice of the words of the Lord. Listen to this. "Thus says the Lord of hosts, I will punish Amalek for what he did to Israel, how he ambushed him on the way when he came up from Egypt. Now go and attack Amalek and utterly destroy all that they have, and do not spare them, but kill both man and woman, infant and nursing child, ox and sheep, camel and donkey." Just 2 verses, very specific. Go in, get it done, get out. That's it. That's what you're supposed to do. So here it comes. Just consider this. We're here receiving instruction on the things that we're supposed to do as potential pilots. You need to understand things. You need to understand the reasons for things and where it comes from and why. And so the reason we do that is because that's the way it's supposed to be. It wouldn't be there if it wasn't important. So the fact is that we go through and we understand that there's the things that Morgan's going to go over are essential, and there's a reason. And sometimes we like to think we know better, but we don't. And we're going to find out that Saul did the same thing, and it had a dramatic consequence for him. I also thought, because some of us may be potentially driving soon, things like that, there could be all kinds of reasons for us to try to compromise the rules or the things that we know we're supposed to do, and slide or sidestep and maybe take a shortcut or think and justify it. And we'll go through that in just a minute, but I wanted you to put that in your mind. It's going to tie it in real early on, just like that. So let's kick this off here. So there's what Saul did. Here's his response to that. And what happens? Saul gathered the people together and numbered them in Telaim, 200,000 foot soldiers and 10,000 men of Judah. And Saul came to a city of Amalek and lay in wait in the valley. Then Saul said to the Kenites, "Go, depart, get down from among the Amalekites, lest I destroy you with them, for you showed kindness to all the children of Israel when they came up out of Egypt." So the Kenites departed from among the Amalekites, which, smart, right? He gave them a warning because they did them a favor, they did them a solid. And they're like, "Listen, we're coming in, you better get out of the way because we're taking everybody out." That's what we're supposed to do anyway. Verse 7, Saul attacked the Amalekites from Havilah all the way to Shur, which is east of Egypt. He also took Agag, king of the Amalekites, alive and utterly destroyed all the people with the edge of the sword. But Saul and the people spared Agag and the best of the sheep, the oxen, the fatlings, the lambs, and all that was good, and were unwilling to utterly destroy them, but everything despised and worthless they utterly destroyed. So right there, we see that there's a partial obedience. There's somewhat of what was said was completed, except that the main point wasn't to go in and do damage. It was to completely take care of the situation, to do all of the steps, go through the whole thing, spare nothing at all, none. It was only 2 verses, and we went through and saw all the stuff that happened as a result. So this is where people can deviate, and you might be able to start saying, well, what's wrong with that? Like, it seems good, right? I mean, and this is what Saul's going to do. But those are the thoughts that we have. We go back to the instructions and understand that God said it for a reason, and there's a purpose in it, and we don't necessarily know why, but we just need to trust that it's the right thing. But if God says to do something, you better do it just the way he said, and this is what happens. Verse 10, "Now the word of the Lord came to Samuel, saying, I greatly regret that I have set up Saul as king, for he has turned back from following me and has not performed my commandments. And it grieved Samuel, and he cried out to the Lord all night. So when Samuel rose early in the morning to meet Saul, it was told Samuel, saying, Saul went to Carmel, and indeed he set up a monument for himself." That's great. "And he has gone on around, passed by, and gone down to Gilgal." So he actually made a statue of his victory when he disobeyed the commandment of the Lord. So again, he's just kind of boasting in that. Not good. Then verse 13, "Samuel went to Saul, and Saul said to him, Blessed are you of the Lord. I have performed the commandment of the Lord." That's a lie. That's a fib right there. So he comes out first, and don't you sometimes, as as adults and kids, will say, I've done everything I'm supposed to do, or what seems to be the problem, officer? I don't know what you're talking about, right? That type of thing. This is Saul coming on saying, hey, Samuel, I did everything I was supposed to do. Isn't that great? We're here. We did it. Victory is ours. You see that monument I made back there? It's pretty cool, huh? Yeah, so that's his attitude. He's trying to justify or cover up the fact that he did not by saying that he did, which is a straight out lie. But fortunately, the word of the Lord came to Samuel, so he knew the truth, right? So, I mean, you could say that maybe there's some cameras rolling on this one. We got some video evidence to kind of go against what's being said here. But Samuel says this in verse 14, what then is this bleating of the sheep in my ears and the lowing of the oxen which I hear? It's like, how can that be, right? And Saul said, so he goes back and he's like, oh, yeah. So he says, they have brought them from the Amalekites. And he says, they have done this, not me. They did this. This is those people that, I'm leading. They did it. They brought them from the Amalekites, for the people spared the best of the sheep and the oxen to sacrifice to the Lord your God. And the rest we have utterly destroyed. Then Samuel said to Saul, be quiet, and I will tell you what the Lord said to me last night. And he said to him, speak on. So he's like, yeah, we're done here. No, less is more. Don't keep talking because you're digging yourself a hole. That's what you're doing. And that's what we can do. When we start trying to cover things up, justify them, make it seem better than it is, even though it's completely wrong. Like, well, I hear this all the time, but I was just, come on. You all said that, right? Everybody has. I have. I was just trying to do something right, get something good. It just seemed better in the time. It seemed like a good idea. So he says, speak on. So he's willing to hear it, but he's already made up his mind. He's going to come back and try to justify it again. So here's what Samuel said in verse 17. When you were little in your own eyes, were you not head of the tribes of Israel? And did not the Lord anoint you king over Israel? Now the Lord sent you on a mission and said, go and utterly destroy the sinners, the Amalekites, and fight against them until they are consumed completely. Why then did you not obey the voice of the Lord? Why did you swoop down on the spoil and do evil in the sight of the Lord? So he calls him right out, directly, which is good. That's what we need. We need people to call us out directly when we do something wrong. If the police officer pulls you over and you're doing the wrong thing, I say, yeah, you caught me, man. I shouldn't have done that. I had that happen to me. And, he spared me. He had mercy. I didn't deserve it, but he gave me mercy. I was doing the wrong thing. So this is what he says. In verse 20, Saul says to Samuel, but I have obeyed the voice of the Lord. He's like, what do you... He's going to try one more time. I have obeyed the voice of the Lord and gone on the mission on which the Lord sent me and brought back King Agag of Amalek. I have utterly destroyed the Amalekites. So again, he's like, if you go back to verses 2 and 3, that doesn't quite match, right? And so, the officer says, this doesn't quite match. Or if you're a pilot, you have your checklist, and you're like, well, these aren't checked. Why didn't these get checked off? Well, it was close enough. I just figured it was fine. It was good enough. So keep that in mind. I destroyed the Amalekites. I did everything, and I brought the king back. I thought that was better at the time. He said, but the people, he blames other people, blame shifting. The people took the plunder, sheep and oxen. I was just going with the flow of traffic. It's fine. I was late. I had to do it. The people took the plunder, sheep and oxen, the best of the things which have been utterly destroyed, to sacrifice to the Lord your God in Gilgal. He goes back to that. He's going to stick to that story. That's what it was. It's the people. They really wanted it. I kind of understood where they're coming from. I didn't really want to, but, it's better for them. They wanted to do it, so that's what we did. And so this is the response. This is the end of it here. Samuel said, has the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? So he's saying you're putting offerings over the voice of the Lord, or like you're offering it to him, but you're doing it against what he's saying. It's hypocritical. Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed than the fat of rams. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he also has rejected you from being king. So the consequences for that, for lying and not obeying what God said, are actually losing the kingdom. And there's a process to that. But the point is that as we go through, and I gave some examples, like real life ones, as you know, some of you may haven't experienced that yet, but driving, you go faster because you're late. Well, you're late because you didn't plan well, not because the speed limit's not right. We justify these things because we want to make up for our inadequacies, or to please the crowd, or to make other people be okay, and we do things that aren't really quite right. And in flight, like I was saying, think about it. If you skip steps and that's what causes an accident, that's on you. That Saul got caught. He might have got away with it, but he didn't. And sometimes we get away with things and we think it's okay, but then eventually you get found out. Again, it comes down, you don't like to be inconvenienced or wait or do anything like that, but in the end, following the steps, following the process, trusting in what's been established, especially from the Lord. But in this case, in aviation, from years and years of science and data and people crashing, we've talked about that. Like, there were accidents, and they make changes and adjustments, and it comes to a science that's for your protection. These are good things. You want to do it that way. Do it God's way. Listen to the instruction. So I would sum it up in this. This is what I came to as far as the wisdom, the summary. And most of us know the first part of this. It's in a lot of kids' songs. But Proverbs 3:5-8, we're going to continue it here. So trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. We know that part, right? And that's a very important. And then it says in verse 7, do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord, or have reverence for him, and depart from evil. It will be health to your flesh and strength to your bones. You'll always come out better in the end when you stick to what God says than if you try to do what you think is best when it's going against what he says in the first place. That's what Saul found out, and that's what we can find out here. And so I advise you to pay attention and understand and learn the things that we're going through so that you can apply them correctly and have a safe life as a pilot, if that's what the Lord wants for you. Amen. I'll hand it over to Morgan then.
All right. Thanks for being here tonight, guys. I'll pray and then we'll get started. Lord, thank you for this evening. Thank you for your word. Reminder of just simple obedience, and that's what you wanted. I do lift up this evening. I pray that you just give wisdom and grace, that it would be a sweet time to learn, and it would be glorifying to you in everything, God. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. It's the second one. I think it's that one. Yeah. Yes, I think that's correct. So we'll start with a video and do like last week. We'll go through some questions about the video.
convective precipitation. Arrow pointing in the direction from which the wind is blowing. Winds are described by the direction from which they blow. Thus, a northwest wind means that the wind is blowing from the northwest toward the southeast. The speed of the wind is depicted by barbs or pennants placed on the wind line. Each barb represents a speed of 10 knots, while half a barb is equal to 5 knots, and a pennant is equal to 50 knots. The pressure for each station is recorded on the weather chart and is shown in millibars. Isobars are lines drawn on the chart to depict areas of equal pressure. These lines result in a pattern that reveals the pressure gradient, or change in pressure over distance, as shown above. Isobars are similar to contour lines on a topographic map that indicate terrain altitudes and slope steepness. For example, isobars that are closely spaced indicate a steep wind gradient, and strong winds prevail. Shallow gradients, on the other hand, are represented by isobars that are spaced far apart and are indicative of light winds. Isobars help identify low and high pressure systems, as well as the location of ridges, troughs, and cutoff lows, coals. A high is an area of high pressure surrounded by lower pressure. A low is an area of low pressure surrounded by higher pressure. A ridge is an elongated area of high pressure, and a trough is an elongated area of low pressure. A coal is the intersection between a ridge and a trough, or an area of neutrality between two highs or two lows. The stability of the atmosphere depends on its ability to resist vertical motion. A stable atmosphere makes vertical movement difficult, and small vertical disturbances dampen out and disappear. In an unstable atmosphere, small vertical air movements tend to become larger, resulting in turbulent airflow and convective activity. Instability can lead to significant turbulence, extensive vertical clouds, and severe weather. Rising air expands and cools due to the decrease in air pressure as altitude increases. The opposite is true of descending air. As atmospheric pressure increases, the temperature of descending air increases as it is compressed. Adiabatic heating and adiabatic cooling are terms used to describe this temperature change. When a parcel of air rises, pressure decreases, volume increases, and temperature decreases. When air descends, the opposite is true. The rate at which temperature decreases with an increase in altitude is referred to as its lapse rate. As air ascends through the atmosphere, the average rate of temperature change is 2 degrees Celsius. 3.5 degrees Fahrenheit per 1,000 feet. The combination of moisture and temperature determine the stability of the air and the resulting weather. Cool, dry air is very stable and resists vertical movement, which leads to good and generally clear weather. The greatest instability occurs when the air is moist and warm, as it is in the tropical regions in the summer. Typically, thunderstorms appear on a daily basis in these regions due to the instability of the surrounding air. As air rises and expands in the atmosphere, the temperature decreases. There is an atmospheric anomaly that can occur, however, that changes this typical pattern of atmospheric behavior. When the temperature of the air rises with altitude, a temperature inversion exists. Inversion layers are commonly shallow layers of smooth, stable air close to the ground. The temperature of the air increases with altitude to a certain point, which is the top of the inversion. The air at the top of the layer acts as a lid, keeping weather and pollutants trapped below. If the relative humidity of the air is high, it can contribute to the formation of clouds, fog, haze, or smoke, resulting in diminished visibility in the inversion layer. Surface-based temperature inversions occur on clear, cool nights, when the air close to the ground is cooled by the lowering temperature of the ground. The air within a few hundred feet of the surface becomes cooler than the air above it. Frontal inversions occur when warm air spreads over a layer of cooler air, or cooler air is forced under a layer of warmer air. The atmosphere, by nature, contains moisture in the form of water vapor. The amount of moisture present in the atmosphere is dependent upon the temperature of the air. Every 20 degrees Fahrenheit increase in temperature doubles the amount of moisture the air can hold. Conversely, a decrease of 20 degrees Fahrenheit cuts the capacity in half. The above image relates to humidity. Humidity refers to the amount of water vapor present in the atmosphere at a given time. Relative humidity is the actual amount of moisture in the air compared to the total amount of moisture the air could hold at that temperature. For example, if the current relative humidity is 65%, the air is holding 65% of the total amount of moisture that it is capable of holding at that temperature and pressure. The relationship between dew point and temperature defines the concept of relative humidity. The dew point, given in degrees, is the temperature at which the air can hold no more moisture. When the temperature of the air is reduced to the dew point, the air is completely saturated, and moisture begins to condense out of the air in the form of fog, dew, frost, clouds, rain, hail, or snow. As moist, unstable air rises, clouds often form at the altitude where temperature and dew point reach the same value. When lifted, unsaturated air cools at the rate of 5.4 degrees Fahrenheit per 1,000 feet, and the dew point temperature decreases at the rate of 1 degree Fahrenheit per 1,000 feet. This results in a convergence of temperature and dew point at a rate of 4.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Apply the convergence rate to the reported temperature and dew point to determine the height of the cloud base. As shown above, with an outside air temperature of 85 degrees Fahrenheit at the surface and dew point at the surface of 71 degrees Fahrenheit, the spread is 14 degrees. Divide the temperature-dew point spread by the convergence rate of 4.4 degrees Fahrenheit and multiply by 1,000 to determine the approximate height of the cloud base. If air reaches the saturation point while temperature and dew point are close together, it is highly likely that fog, low clouds, and precipitation will form. There are 4 methods by which air can reach the complete saturation point. First, when warm air moves over a cold surface, the air temperature drops and reaches the saturation point. Second, the saturation point may be reached when cold air and warm air mix. Third, When air cools at night through contact with the cooler ground, air reaches its saturation point. The fourth method occurs when air is lifted or is forced upward in the atmosphere. On cool, calm nights, the temperature of the ground and objects on the surface can cause temperatures of the surrounding air to drop below the dew point. When this occurs, the moisture in the air condenses and deposits itself on the ground, buildings, and other objects like cars and aircraft. This moisture is known as dew and sometimes can be seen on grass in the morning. If the temperature is below freezing, the moisture is deposited in the form of frost. While dew poses no threat to an aircraft, frost poses a definite flight safety hazard. Frost disrupts the flow of air over the wing and can drastically reduce the production of lift. It also increases drag, which, when combined with lowered lift production, can adversely affect the ability to take off. An aircraft must be thoroughly cleaned and free of frost prior to beginning a flight. Fog is a cloud that begins within 50 feet of the surface. It typically occurs when the temperature of air near the ground is cooled to the air's dew point. At this point, water vapor in the air condenses and becomes visible in the form of fog. Fog is classified according to the manner in which it forms and is dependent upon the current temperature and the amount of water vapor in the air. Clouds are visible indicators and are often indicative of future weather. For clouds to form, there must be adequate water vapor and condensation nuclei, as well as a method by which the air can be cooled. When the air cools and reaches its saturation point, the invisible water vapor changes into a visible state. Through the processes of deposition, also referred to as sublimation, and condensation, moisture condenses or sublimates onto minuscule particles of matter like dust, salt, and smoke, known as condensation nuclei. The nuclei are important because they provide a means for the moisture to change from one state to another. Cloud type is determined by its height, shape, and behavior. They are classified according to the height of their bases as low, middle, or high clouds, as well as clouds with vertical development shown above. Low clouds are those that form near the Earth's surface and extend up to 6,500 feet AGL. They are made primarily of water droplets, but can include supercooled water droplets that induce hazardous aircraft icing. Typical low clouds are stratus, stratocumulus, and nimbostratus. Fog is also classified as a type of low cloud formation. Clouds in this family create low ceilings, hamper visibility, and can change rapidly. Because of this, they influence flight planning and can make visual flight rules, VFR flight, impossible. Middle clouds form around 6,500 feet AGL and extend up to 20,000 feet AGL. They are composed of water, ice crystals, and supercooled water droplets. Typical middle-level clouds include altostratus and altocumulus. These types of clouds may be encountered on cross-country flights at higher altitudes. Altostratus clouds can produce turbulence and may contain moderate icing. Altocumulus clouds, which usually form when altostratus clouds are breaking apart, also may contain light turbulence and icing. High clouds form above 20,000 feet AGL and usually form only in stable air. They are made up of ice crystals and pose no real threat of turbulence or aircraft icing. Typical high-level clouds are cirrus, cirrostratus, and cirrocumulus. Clouds with extensive vertical development are cumulus clouds that build vertically into towering cumulus or cumulonimbus clouds. The bases of these clouds form in the low to middle cloud base region, but can extend into high-altitude cloud levels. Towering cumulus clouds indicate areas of instability in the atmosphere, and the air around and inside them is turbulent. These types of clouds often develop into cumulonimbus clouds or thunderstorms. Cumulonimbus clouds contain large amounts of moisture and unstable air, and usually produce hazardous weather phenomena such as lightning, hail, tornadoes, gusty winds, and wind shear. These extensive vertical clouds can be obscured by other cloud formations and are not always visible from the ground or while in flight. When this happens, these clouds are said to be embedded, hence the term embedded thunderstorms. To pilots, the cumulonimbus cloud is perhaps the most dangerous cloud type. Since rising air currents cause cumulonimbus clouds, they are extremely turbulent and pose a significant hazard to flight safety. For example, if an aircraft enters a thunderstorm, the aircraft could experience updrafts and downdrafts that exceed 3,000 feet per minute. In addition, thunderstorms can produce large hailstones, damaging lightning, tornadoes, and large quantities of water, all of which are potentially hazardous to aircraft. We hope you learned a lot. Please help us spread the word about Pilot Training System, and we look forward to further servicing your flight training needs.
You guys memorize all that? It's okay. We'll go through some questions about it. So, okay, first question. First question is, what is wind shear? Can anybody give me the answer? I kind of talked about it at the beginning of the video. Any clue? Any idea? How about like microburst or low level wind shear? Is any of that ringing a bell? You say yeah? Oh, okay. All right. We'll talk about that for a second then. So wind shear basically just means there's a dramatic change in the direction or the speed of the wind. So you're flying along and the wind's coming from some direction at some speed, and all of a sudden it's like a strong gust. You know what I mean? Like a gust of wind in some direction or the other. That's not the normal. So wind shear can be really dangerous. When do you think wind shear would be pretty dangerous? Like what part of the flying? Yeah, or landing when you're, and why? Why do you think it would be dangerous around that time? Yeah, because you're close to the ground. And, you know, if you're up in the air and a few thousand feet high and you get bumped around a few feet, it's not going to make a big deal. But if you're just a few feet off the ground, that could be a big deal, right? So, wind shear, low level wind shear, LLWS, a lot of times it's abbreviated, low level wind shear, is really dangerous because it's just wind shear that's close to the ground, basically. So, the diagram the video showed like a diagram of an airplane flying along. You guys remember? And he was flying along this way, and then the wind shear, I'll make it red so you know it's dangerous. It's like this. And they showed this is an example of like a microburst, what's called, it's just like a type of wind shear. And basically, the airplane's flying along, and what happens at this point? What happens to the airplane? What? Yeah, it's going to have a headwind. All right. Now, what about right here at this point? Right, it's going to get pushed straight down. And then at this point, what's going to happen? It's going to have tailwind. And the danger of a tailwind is if you're real close to the ground, that tailwind's going to push the airplane forward and potentially downward into the ground. So microbursts, low-level wind shear, very dangerous. A lot of times you'll see them not forecasted, but observed. And like if there's wind shear going on in an airport, you'll see it in the weather reports. So, okay. Any questions on wind shear? What does LLWS stand for? Very good. All right. Next question. What are isobars? Does anybody remember? It's a kind of a funky term. Anybody? Okay. It was a long video, so it's hard to remember the things from the beginning. So let's talk about that. So when we look at weather maps, and we'll get into this more, actually not this semester, but it'll be in the fall semester, we'll get into like weather, like looking how to figure out what the weather's doing at any given time. And so they publish like different charts and stuff. And one of the things they publish is this is a chart that has isobars on it. So it's like a map. So you're gonna see my terrible geography of the United States. And there's Maine, awkwardly shaped. All right, so that's supposed to be the United States. And you'll see like these isobars, which are just lines of equal pressure on a map. So, and these change with the weather. So it's like a weather report. So you'll have like, they like look like this. Something like that. I don't know. And basically it's just showing like higher pressure and lower pressure in different areas. So you'll have like a low pressure area and a high pressure area, and isobars are just lines of equal pressure on that are noted on a map. And the reason why we talked about this is it helps us to kind of see what the winds are doing. So we know that high pressure areas of high pressure air, like this high pressure area, we'll just say this is a high pressure area. The wind from a high pressure area, the air from a high pressure area is going to want to move toward low pressure area and wants to equalize. So you can see kind of what the wind's doing. And if let's say there's a low pressure area up here, over here the isobars are really far apart, like they're pretty far apart. So the wind is not going to be very strong. And then up here, the high pressure is going to try and go to this low pressure area up here as well. So it's kind of spreading out in all directions. But it's going to this low pressure area, and the isobars are real close together, which means there's a really steep like change in pressure. And that's going to cause strong winds in that area. The isobars you can kind of think of, has anybody seen, I know that she mentioned this in the video, a topographical map? Have you guys ever seen like a map that has like lines to show like mountains and stuff? Yeah? Yeah, so that is kind of what it is. So like you have a high pressure area here. Sometimes more realistically, it'll be like a high pressure area like that, and then like a low pressure area, okay? So you can kind of visualize it. Like it's not really like an actual mountain in the air, but it's just showing you like a visual. The high pressure, you can think of it like a mountain, like low pressure. If you looked from like the side, if you're standing here in Florida and looking at this, you could like visualize it like low pressure areas and then high pressure areas. You could think of it kind of like a mountain. And then if the lines are really close together, so like if you have a high pressure area that has like lines really, really close together, and then a high pressure area that has lines that are like farther apart, that means the pressure is changing slowly here. The pressure is changing very quickly. So this would look like a steep mountain, and this would look like, if you were to visualize it, like a mountain. You can think of it like that. So, and the way to remember that is like, okay, so a steep mountain, if you had like air moving down or water or something moving down this, remember the high pressure moves outward, and then low pressure is going to move inward, right? So the high pressure is pushing outward. So if it's steep, it's going to move faster. So you're going to have faster winds in this kind of area, and then the winds are not going to be as strong on the shallower kind of mountain. Again, it's not like if we looked out at the air, we're not actually going to see like a mountain of pressure, but it's a good way to like visualize what's going on. And the steeper the pressure change, the more strong the wind will be. So, any questions on that? No, I'll take that as a no. Okay. So I answered the third question. And we'll go to, would you more likely, okay, somebody, if isobars are close together, does that indicate weak or strong winds? Strong winds, yes, thank you. Glad you were paying attention to the last 5 minutes of me rambling. All right, would you more likely find rising air or turbulence in stable or unstable air? Correct. Unstable air is characteristics of that are you're gonna have rising air, you're gonna have what we call convective activity, turbulence. Convective activity is what causes thunderstorms. So it's rising air. Very good. All right. This is like a big question, but what is adiabatic cooling and heating? Anybody like your eyes got very big.
I'm going to say the cooling and heating of air close to the ground.
Kind of. I think you're on the right track. Sort of. You're getting there. So when air is moved upwards or downwards, the temperature changes. So the pressure and the temperature changes. So if I were to take like a cardboard box of air, or just pretend that there's a cardboard box around it, but some air, and I were to like lift it up to like 3,000 feet or something, the characteristics of that air are going to change, okay? So if I push air upwards, the air is going to expand, and the temperature is going to change. It's going to cool down. So it's going to become cooler. This is the reason why, So then the opposite is true. If you pulled air downward, it would compress and it would warm up, okay? So this is adiabatic cooling and heating basically is just depending the pressure change, whether it's compressing or expanding, changes the temperature. And this isn't talking about because there's different ways that you can heat up and cool down air. And this isn't talking about like the sun cooling up the air. It's just literally the air is changing temperature without actually adding or taking away any heat. All right, so that's why adiabatic cooling is talking about that. And in our situation in aviation and weather, the way that happens is air gets pushed up and it expands and it cools down, or air gets pushed down and it compresses and it warms up. So anyway, that's kind of like adiabatic cooling and heating. Do you guys remember from last week? I think we talked about this. The temperature changes as you increase altitude, right? Does it, so based on what we were talking about, does it warm up, or does it cool down? Right. As like if you've climbed on a mountain, so you normally like colder up there, right? Does anybody remember how much it changes per 1,000 feet? Yes. 2 degrees Celsius. You're so close. That was you had the 2 right. So it changes 2 degrees per 1,000 feet. So that's called the standard lapse rate. Anyway, all this kind of ties in together with adiabatic cooling, because you have air that's up in the atmosphere is cooler than the air lower down. Okay. Go to the next slide. So, question. Would you generally have better flying weather on a cold, stable air day in Maine or a hot, unstable air day in Florida? I don't know whose hand went up first. Stable Maine. Okay. Why?
Because the air is stable, so it would be easier to maneuver around it.
Yeah. Generally unstable air, and I just gave like an example because unstable air, warm air is generally going to be unstable, and that is going to cause like turbulence, create thunderstorms, all kinds of nasty stuff that you don't really enjoy flying in. So cooler days, as long as it's not a snowstorm, Cooler days usually are going to be better weather for flying. What is a temperature inversion? Does anybody know? Yes.
When temperature goes up when air rises instead of going down when air rises.
Good. Very good. Yeah. So temperature inversion, as we've been talking about, when you increase altitude, you should notice that the temperature goes down because of the adiabatic cooling. But a temperature inversion is when there's an anomaly, it's like unusual, where you go up and then all of a sudden you find the temperature like increasing as well. So it gets hotter basically as you climb, which is the opposite of what would occur. And this can happen like with fronts. So we're not going to get into cold fronts too much, but if you have like, so if you have like a cold front, here's the ground. And there's like cold air, and you have a cold front. You guys familiar with kind of what happened, like cold fronts that come through, and it's basically cold air coming in, passing through an area, replacing warmer air. So this is the colder air. Different areas of the United States will have, areas of colder air and warmer air, and then that air moves around. So a colder area portion of air will come in and kind of replace the warmer air. Well, if you're here, this is warmer air right here, okay? Because the cold fronts are kind of shaped like this wedge, sort of wedges in. If you're here and you're, flying and you climb up through here, it's colder down here, and then you climb, and all of a sudden, boop, it's getting warmer because you just popped through that warm air. So that's one way you could have a temperature inversion. There's other ways too, but that's a common way. Any questions on that? Nope. Okay. How does the air temperature, okay, so now we're going to get into a different subject. How does the air temperature change the amount of moisture that air can hold? That's kind of a complicated question. So if you have air can hold a certain amount of moisture, and how does changing the temperature of that change the amount of moisture the air can hold?
Because when air heats up, the molecules get further apart, so the water molecules have more space to fit between the air molecules.
I actually don't even know if I don't even know that deep. That's going deeper than my knowledge. But you're right in that as air warms up, it holds more water. That was what I was looking for. So you nailed it on that. And you went deeper than I know. But yeah, so the warmer air is able to hold more moisture in the air without it turning into clouds or something. So when air gets okay, I don't want to answer the next question before I ask it. So what is relative, I've been known to do that. What is relative humidity? Anybody want to throw a guess out?
Humidity that's relative.
Okay. Did you have a thought?
Is it relative to the temperature?
Yes, actually, very good. So if I have a cardboard box of air, okay, and it's a certain temperature, let's say, I'm just going to throw out a random temperature. I'll draw my cardboard box here, actually. That way you guys can see. Let's say I have 2 cardboard boxes full of air. All right, the first one over here is the air is 50 degrees Fahrenheit. And then over here, the air is 90 degrees Fahrenheit. All right, so which box of air is going to, the air in which of these boxes is going to hold, I can't ask this question. Which one is going to hold more moisture? Okay. Thank you. You guys probably could answer the question before I could ask it. So the 90-degree cardboard box of air is going to hold, the air inside will hold more moisture than the cooler air. All right. So let's say there's, I'm just going to throw, these are totally random numbers that I'm making up and are not accurate in real life. I'm just kind of giving you examples here. So let's say this cardboard box holds like 10 ounces of water, okay? The air that's 90 degrees in this cardboard box can hold 10, yes.
A cardboard box cannot hold water.
No. Well, that's, so, okay. That's a good question. Okay, so, no. I didn't want to confuse you. All right. The air inside the box is actually holding. So, like, the air in this room, there's actually moisture. There's a small amount of moisture in the air in this room. Like, when the air can no longer hold the moisture, because air can hold an amount of water and moisture. When it is no longer able to, when like the air gets too full to hold any more moisture, it pops it out in the form of clouds or clouds, dew, or fog. So like if there's fog, that means you can see there's moisture, right? Like we know that there's moisture in the air when there's fog. But the air can hold an amount of moisture without us actually seeing it. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. We're talking about like the air in this room does have moisture. So let's say this air in this box, it looks like just regular air, but it can hold a certain amount of water. And let's say it can hold 10 ounces, just random. So the water is in the air. It's actually like invisible, as if we were just looking at the air like this, like the air in this room. Then you have, let's say this air can only hold, the 50-degree Fahrenheit air can only hold 5 ounces, okay, of water. All right. And that relative humidity, okay, we're going to get into that in just a minute. And I think I am going to kind of give you a little bit away. If you go to the next slide, actually. Okay, I'm giving away the next question, so you guys get a freebie here. But I don't know how else to explain it without, they all tie together. So if I have air here, let's say relative humidity is basically the amount of air the amount of water that air can hold based on the temperature. So it's relative to the temperature. So let's say in this box there is 5 ounces of invisible water that is in the air. The moisture in the air sums up to 5 ounces. So 5 is 50% of 10, so it would be 50% humidity. I know a lot of numbers going on here, but so basically we could add 5 ounces of water to this air, and the air would be able to hold that. Then it would be up to 10 ounces. Are you guys following so far? Yeah, okay. So we have relative humidity. Now, let's say there's 5 ounces of water in this box of air. 5 ounces is 100% of what it can hold, which is 5 ounces. So the humidity is 100% here. Same size box, same amount of water, different temperature, and that changed the relative humidity. You guys following? Any questions so far? Okay.
Well, it's not the same size box because that was 10 ounces and that one is 5.
No, the actual box is, we'll say the same, even though I didn't draw it precisely. That's what I'm saying. The actual amount, the volume of air is the same in this box as it is in this box. But because of the temperature, this one can hold more moisture. The air in this box can hold more moisture because it's warmer. Yep, okay. Any other questions? Yes. We did? In the video? Oh, okay. Well, that is, I wasn't paying attention, I guess, that closely to the numbers. Thank you. There we go. And this is no longer accurate. Well, yeah. Okay. All right. So I think I tried to not answer the question. So, can air become 100% saturated without adding any more moisture content to the air? Okay. Why? Does anybody know why, though? Yes, you can, but why?
Because of temperature, like you said. Because
Yes.
it is a different temperature, it can hold more water, but it'll still have the same volume.
Yes. Yes. Yep, that's exactly correct, actually. We can, if we change the temperature of the air, so like by changing it from 90 degrees to 50 degrees, it would then be, what, 200? No. Oh, yeah, you're right, Thank you. Is it 200? Okay. I'm not good at like really quick math like this, so that's why I make up the numbers so that I don't have to actually do real math. Okay, so then so here it would be 50% humidity. So what happens? Okay, actually, okay, we're gonna skip down to what happens when air is 100% saturated. I kind of said it earlier.
It pops out in the form of fog, smoke, and clouds.
Yes, that is correct. Yep, the air is like, it's way too much water. We can't hold it, so it becomes visible moisture. Okay, usually in the form of clouds. What? No.
Wouldn't it be 101% where it does that?
I think it's 100%. Yeah, that's what I understand. Yeah, I can see how you'd think that, but 100% is what I've been taught. So, it would still go out at 101% though too. So, you know. Ah. Good point. That's a good point. It's like a technicality that I've never thought about before. Um, so now we're gonna go backwards. What is the dew point?
It's the point of the atmosphere at which the atmosphere condenses to form dew on the ground.
Yes, that is true. Kinda. Yep. So the dew point as relating to temperature and moisture content of the air. So like oh my goodness. Now I'm distracted and I lost my train of thought. Okay. So basically, if you have air, let's say this air that has 5 ounces of water in it, 5 ounces of moisture, okay? So that air with that amount of moisture in it has what's called a dew point. And that's the point. If I cooled this air down to a certain temperature, it would then be 100% saturated. So what's the temperature? Ross, would it be 70? Okay, thank you. All right, so at 70 degrees Fahrenheit, if I cool this same box of air down, 70 degrees Fahrenheit, the air would only hold 5 ounces, like the same size volume of air would only hold 5 ounces of water. So if I cool this down to 70 degrees, it's going to be 5 ounces. So it's going to be 100% saturated, okay? So the saturation, like the dew point is the temperature. If you have a parcel of air that has a certain amount of moisture and you cool that moisture down to the point where it's 100% saturated, that is the dew point. So it's in the form like a temperature basically, but that's what it's talking about. That's what the dew point is talking about. So, any questions on that? Okay. How does dew form? Now, any ideas?
Pops out.
It forms when the air is stable at night, is stable and cool at night. So the water vapor inside of it condenses into droplets on the ground.
Yeah. So, at night, I think you understand. So at night you have air. Like, is it cooler or warmer? Like if you go outside at night, it's cooler, right? So the air cools down. The air cools down, and then the air has moisture in it. So if it cools below its dew point, that moisture is going to have to come out, and so it ends up coming out in the form of dew and like moisture on the ground. So that's how dew forms. All right, go to the next slide. Now, let's talk a little bit about frost, actually. Frost, can anyone guess how frost is formed now that we've talked a little bit about dew? Oh, wow. Okay, I don't know. I have no idea who's... By Jack Frost. Any other answers? Guys get rock, paper, scissors it or something. I don't know. Okay.
Frost is formed the same way as dew, except when it is when the temperature is below freezing.
Yes. The temperature of the surface of this, like the ground, has to be below freezing, and then it will form frost instead of dew. So, how does frost affect pilots or aircraft?
Freezes the engine. Or it just, it gets on the wings.
Yes.
Affects lift and
Yep.
something else. Drag.
Yeah, it adds weight. Did you have something going? You guys remember that term laminar airflow? Smooth laminar flow. We have like all of my 500 wing drawings, and you have the smooth airflow moving over the wing, the laminar flow. So frost gets in there even just like a tiny bit, and it'll basically like disrupt lift being created on the wing, which is no bueno. So we definitely want the wings to create lift. So that's an important thing to check, especially here in Maine. But and if the airplane is like not in a hangar, but it's kept outside. Okay. How do clouds form?
It just popped out. They form
wait.
when water vapor in the air condenses around microscopic particles of dust to form visible puffs of water vapor in the atmosphere.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. Yep. I'm not gonna disagree with that. So, air, part of that too is the air. Remember, if I lift air up, what happens to it?
It cools down and condenses.
cools down. And as an air, if I have moisture in the air and if I cool it down enough, what's going to happen? Poof, right? the the moisture can no longer be held by, like the air can't hold the moisture anymore. So cloud forms. Very good. And yes, it does form on little tiny like minuscule. Yeah, basically. They're called nuclei, I think. Okay, so
It's nucleuses. It used to be pronounced nuclei, like cacti and octopi, but now it's pronounced nucleuses, like cactuses and octopuses.
I stand corrected then. Okay. um, all right, so let's talk a little bit about clouds. What are the four type? This is kind of a trick question. What are the four types of cloud height classifications? Does anybody remember? Huh? Oh.
High, mid-high, mid-low, and low.
High, middle, low, and then clouds with extensive vertical development. Okay. That is a big one. That's why I said it's kind of a trick question. So, but yeah.
Big name, big cloud.
Yeah, basically. There you go. Clouds with extensive vertical development. That'll be our club name. It's a new word. All right. So now let's talk about, and you have, okay, low clouds don't really have like a term that we use to talk about them. Middle clouds, a lot of times we use the term alto to like the prefix alto, so like an alto stratus or an alto cumulus or like an alto cloud. And then the high clouds generally are like cirrus clouds. So what I'm going to draw three types of clouds. All right. A, B, C. And this will answer the last three questions. One of them is stratus, one of them is cumulus, and one is cirrus. So what type is A? All right, one of you can do A and the other one can do B.
It's stratus.
A is stratus, yes. What is B? Do you know B?
B is cirrus.
Cirrus. And C? Anybody else? Yeah? Which is? Cumulus. Yep. Very good. So you've got cumulus, which is like the big, white, puffy, fluffy clouds that look like a big pillow that you could just like fall into. The stratus, or like the long, like flat clouds. And then the cirrus are like the stringy, thin, high clouds, usually very high up in that. And the cirrus are generally like frozen. They're usually ice because they're so high in the atmosphere. Okay, two other terms I didn't really have on the question here. Or actually, no, one other term. Oh, no, two other terms. Okay. Nimbus or nimbo. Does anybody remember what that means?
Nimbus means, so a nimbostratus cloud is a cloud that causes rain, and a cumulonimbus is a cloud that causes rain and thunder and lightning and all that.
Yes, very good. So nimbus just means like rain, you're going to have precipitation. And then a cumulonimbus, as you mentioned, is another term for thunderstorm, basically. Cumulonimbus, a lot of times you'll see, because cumulonimbus are like the big puffy clouds, and then they get real like dark on the bottom, and then you start getting rain and lightning, all that fun stuff. So that's a thunderstorm, right? And thunderstorms are created by cumulus clouds, but they also have rain, of course. So we call them cumulonimbus. Sometimes you'll see CB, cumulonimbus, abbreviated that way. And here's an extra credit one that I didn't put up there, but what is the most dangerous type of cloud? How would you have guessed? Yes, cumulonimbus, thunderstorms. Different types of thunderstorms are going to be the most dangerous type of cloud, and it's one of the biggest dangers to aviation in general. Like one of the biggest weather concerns are thunderstorm clouds and thunderstorms. So we're going to stop there for tonight, and we will finish weather theory next week. Also, next week will be our last week, and then we'll break for the summer, and we'll come back in the fall. So that we're going to have a potluck. So you guys, and I'll send an email out so parents know. But just so you guys know, next week will be the last week. We'll finish up weather theory, and then we'll break for the summer. So any questions? All right. Thanks, guys. Oh, yeah. I'll leave that to your discernment. How's that? Cool. Well, thank you guys for coming.